Progression Part 2. So when we take a look at progressing your plan, once again, we can actually differentiate between single progression and double progression. Now, single progression involves increasing either the reps or the load for a set, while double progression actually looks at first increasing the reps within a specific range and then increasing the load. Both strategies have limitations. They don't account for individual adaptation rates. For example, beginners, they might not provide enough stimulus, and for advanced athletes, they might result in excessive stimulus. Additionally, when we measure true progress, it can be challenging with these methods, especially like dynamic double progression. That will address these issues by adjusting reps and or load within a given rep range to achieve high relative effort target. Now, this approach actually considers the rate of adaptation, which we can see here, and the stimulus progresses appropriately. So it focuses on the effort exerted during the set rather than specific load or reps, allowing for auto-regulation based on daily readiness, whether high or low. So you could be going into a training session. Let's say you are focusing on dynamic double progression, so adjusting reps and or load within a given rep range. Perhaps you've got 2 sets of a dumbbell incline press, a 6 to 9 and then a 10 to 15. Perhaps you're feeling really, really good. So therefore load goes up and your repetitions go up. Or actually you're not having a great day, therefore you can auto-regulate, maybe reps come down, or maybe even reps go a little bit higher, but you just reduce the load based on how you are feeling. So that's where intensity within that given set, even if you're not performing to the highest standard, is going to be significantly important. So looking at dynamic double progression, actually tracking that progression involves monitoring key metrics like the load that you're using, repetitions in reserve, and also total volume load as well, which we can abbreviate to VL. Now, over 4 weeks, adjustments in these variables can actually indicate progress and inform us of future training decisions. So let's take, for example, in week 1, the load and the reps resulted in a total volume load of around 9,160. In week 2, the total volume load has actually increased to 10,565. So we've got a plus 13% total volume load increase. Then in week 3, it's 11,160. So a plus 5%. And then in week 4, perhaps total volume load actually drops to 10,450, meaning that we'll have to step into a deload or perhaps even a devolume. So we do want to see linear progression with these sorts of things. If we find that obviously performance is dropping based on a specific exercise, load, reps, number of sets, then we can tweak those things. We can swap out the exercise. We can look at how much volume you're actually doing for that muscle group. Is it impacting your overall training performance on a specific training day, or is it impacting your training performance across the week? But ultimately, the very, very simple way of doing this is just looking at total volume load and seeing that percentage increase or even that number increase as well. So we can actually, from week 3, you hit a total volume load of 11,160. That's plus 5% increase since the last time. Therefore, we are progressing. However, when it drops, we're actually regressing. So maybe it's time for a deload. So again, dynamic double progression. In week 1, we want to begin by selecting a load that allows you to reach a high effort set within your target rep range. So let's say, for example, you're aiming for 6 to 9 reps. We want to adjust the load after the first set to remain within this range. So keeping in mind that a 5% change in weight typically affects around plus or minus 2 reps. 10% is about plus or minus 4 reps. 20% is about plus or minus 7 to 8 reps. So that's something to consider if you are doing a top set and a back off. Example, you're doing a 100 kilo bench press. Let's say that you do that for 8 repetitions, but then you want to do a back off and you reduce it by 5%. Well, then you're going to hit plus or minus 2 reps on that. So it'll be 10 repetitions with your selected load. So in weeks 2 to 8, we want to aim to increase the reps to the top of that target range in each session. So if you're doing a 6 to 9 rep range, we want to aim for that 9. Once you reach the top, increase the load and start again at the bottom of that range. On days where rapid progression is going to be prominent, we want to increase both load and the reps by 5 to 10%. So if you're going in, you're having a really good session, then we increase the load and reps. But the key points to remember are effort level. That's going to be paramount. So using whatever load is necessary to achieve high effort within that 6 to 20 rep range. Now, advanced lifters, they may only add 2.5 to 5% load weekly or even bi-weekly to ensure continued progression without overtraining. Progressing effort level. So sets need to be challenging and perform close to failure. So in week 1, we want to start your training block around 1 to 2 reps in reserve. That allows your body to adjust to new lifts. So we've got neuromuscular change and also exercise order. It's a new program, right? This is especially important if you're reintroducing lifts like squats after a long break. We're looking at stability, we're looking at cubes, we're looking at positioning, we're looking at mobility. Beginners should actually keep a higher reps in reserve for safety, while those with high lift proficiency can actually aim for reps in reserve of 0 to 1, which is more suitable for advanced lifters. So you need to categorize yourself whether you are a novice, a beginner, intermediate, or even advanced lifter. Now, from weeks 2 to 8, we want to maintain a high effort of RIR 0 to 1, utilizing dynamic double progression, so adjusting reps, adjusting load within the target rep range. The effort level should remain consistent throughout the training block, and that's to ensure you push your limits while allowing for adequate adaptation and progress over the course of that training block. So typically speaking, a training block should be around 8 to 12 weeks. I like to program around 8 weeks and then you do a deload. Or perhaps if you're breaking it down into mesocycles like we saw on the previous slide, around week 3 is where you peak, week 4 is when performance has dropped off. Maybe having a bad week, you could look at sleep, you could look at stress management, but ultimately if you've got those nailed and you start to see regression, that's when you need to take a deload. How do we actually progress set level? Well, again, we want to determine the appropriate training volume based on current fitness levels. Beginners typically aim for 5 to 9 sets per week. That's pretty much all that they need for now because stimulus is going to be very, very high, while intermediate and advanced individuals may benefit from 8 to 20 sets per week. Then when we move into week 2, we want to maintain the same set volume while focusing on improving lifting proficiency. So making any necessary adjustments to the initial setup and to prioritize progressions in both load and reps. Moving to week 3 to week 8, advanced lifters should auto-regulate their set volume as needed based on their recovery and performance indicators. Beginners and intermediates, on the other hand, should keep their set volume consistent throughout the phase and consider adjustments every 8 weeks to accommodate progress and adaptation. And this structured approach ensures that training volume aligns with your individual capabilities and your goals while allowing for consistent improvement over this designated period. Whether it is 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever it is, make sure that you're continuously tweaking things. How do we auto-regulate set volume? So if you are progressing consistently in all of your lifts, your muscle pumps are satisfying, your recovery is excellent, it might be beneficial to consider adding more volume into your workout. So we want to begin by increasing your set volume by approximately 10% and closely monitor your performance in the gym during the subsequent week to gauge if your recovery remains adequate. So it is really crucial to avoid overdoing it. A lot of guys tend to overdo it and they wonder why they're not building muscle. And excessive sets can actually lead to excessive fatigue and potential setbacks. So we want to add sets gradually from one mesocycle, so a training phase, to the next, allowing for more accurate assessment of your progress and recovery capacity over time. Advanced lifters might strategically add sets to target specific muscle groups or incorporate techniques like rest pause and drop sets for enhanced stimulation and adaptation. So if you want to bring up a specific muscle group, then this could be a tactic that you use. But this approach does ensure that you optimize your training effectiveness while respecting your body's ability to recover and adapt to increased demands. So here's an example of a training block. And it pretty much outlines a progressive approach to strength training over an 8-week period. And it's tailored for both beginners and intermediates based on where you are in your fitness journey. So beginners are going to start conservatively with a set volume of around 5 to 9 sets per muscle group per week and maintain a moderate effort level within 1 to 3 reps in reserve, gradually tightening towards 1 to 2 reps in reserve by week 3 to week 8. Your progression should focus on mastering form and actually gradually increasing load rather than jumping into the deep end without a float because you'll drown. So you should use the dynamic double progression model. In contrast, when we look at intermediate or advanced lifters, they want to start off around the 8 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, with an RIR of 0 to 2, again still using dynamic double progression. And then in week 2, again, we want to hold that constant throughout the duration. We're now pushing towards an RIR 0 to 1, 2 to 10% load progressions and or rep progressions. So depending on the type of day that you're having, ideally we want to push towards the top of that rep range, 6 to 9. We want to aim for 9, 10 to 15. We want to aim to 15. If you're having a really good day, then you increase the load and you do increase the reps. And then between week 3 and week 8, we can auto-regulate it depending on if you're an intermediate or advanced. We're still pushing towards failure and the loads and the reps are still going to be the same.